After our latest writers' meeting, I searched the web for disability projection and got absolutely nothing in terms of the meaning I was looking for. There were statistical treatments of how many people presumably have disabilities now and how many might have them in the future, and projections in that way, but nothing that I thought expressed the fundamental truth of what disability is and why we can't seem to find a proper term for it. You can't call somebody first crippled and then handicapped and then disabled, or none of it ever seems fair, and perhaps for a good reason, which is that disability is fundamentally projective. It's not so much the labeled obvious handicap that someone has, I think, that is the biggest problem. It's the invisible, covered up, unrecognized disability of everybody else that is projected onto the officially disabled person. Everybody has something they suck at that an ordinary person could presumably do, but which for some reason or other is like Superman's kryptonite, and he can't just do that one thing. And for someone who doesn't have to recognize that, doesn't want to recognize it perhaps, then that would be projected onto someone else who's labeled as disabled. This came up from our writers group because of many influences. The U.S. election, someone writing a story about men who can lactate, someone writing about disability, and writing about the weird situation in the public library where they've banned food and drink from every floor except the first floor, and now on the first floor they've taken out all the chairs. So everybody who comes into the library who isn't an employee, I presume the employees probably have their own hidden sections walled off from the public where they can't eat and sit down, is crippled in terms of performing their basic biological functions if they want to try to use the library. So the first thing we started thinking of was, how would you do a civil disobedience or a sit-in? Find some way to actually sit down and eat in the library. This came about through a number of different paths and other prompts that came up. One was to have a spaceship made out of vegetables. This is a prompt I got from a recent Heather Feather video where she asked if you were going to make a spaceship out of vegetables, what vegetable would you choose? And in this case, one of the choices was a stealth vegetable, which would be the one that's hardest to see in the dark. It blends in with its surroundings. The other one was just a vegetable that the person just likes to eat the most. We also wondered about ways of shielding noise, because our writing room that we have, you can actually hear the train going by, and it's going to get worse in the future because they're going to build a library right over top of the train tracks. And you could hear everything else that goes on around as well. We also got talking about this phenomenon of impromptu person delivery. Because of a recent item in the news, a guy was shot in one location, presumably thrown into a car by the people who shot him, and then dumped in another. So he had this whole crime scene investigation going on at something that wasn't the scene of the crime. It was all taped off, and people were surveying and going over with dogs and so on. But this prompted the idea of, what if there were an overall person delivery service? So if you had somebody who's seizing or collapsing in some way, and there is a demand for a seizing or collapsed person, you could call them up and say, dial a body. I want this person who's seizing or falling apart delivered to this location. And then we wondered, okay, give us a fictional reason for why the person is seizing or falling apart, an epilepsy of some sort. And since one of the people was talking about going to the opera and taking a rap fan along with them, they came up with the idea of operalepsy. Somebody who normally likes rap but occasionally has these seizures where they're compelled to sing opera. So we got into the whole, from there, the delivery aspect, I guess, the idea of delivering a body made us project the idea of crippled people onto food because of our crippled capacity for eating food in the library, I guess. And this brought up the idea of crippled pizza. And how, and you thought, well, really, if you think of all the things that are done to pizza, some of them are pretty horrific. It gets rolled and beaten and thrown and shredded, chopped up and roasted. But there's never anything live on a pizza that could be called uncrippled, and it would probably be quite unpractical to have an uncrippled pizza. But all of this came together in various strange ways in our stories. So we had an attempted civil disobedience event in the library that involved all these factors. You call in the body delivery service and the pizza delivery and the spaceship and all sorts of commotion in order to distract people long enough for you to actually pull out your own chair, sit down and eat while everything else is going on. There was also, of course, there was one piece about the U.S. election and the crippled nature of the choices offered, in that a huge chunk of the population considers themselves disenfranchised and not really have anyone that they would want to vote for. Then we had items of people coming together under circumstances where they're institutionally crippled and trying to make the best of it and supporting each other, like being on a bus. And you also had the lactating man having to deal with everybody else's disabilities, and that he's taken on this ability to do something he normally wouldn't be able to do, and gets pinched and groped and beaten in a way that men normally wouldn't attack a woman, but they would attack a man taking on the functions of a woman.